Good afternoon, everyone. Does it work? Are the mics? Yep, now we got it. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Erica Lini, personal economics reporter at the Globe and Mail. And before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that the Globe and Mail's headquarters is situated on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. My colleagues and I are grateful for the opportunity to live and work on this land. I'd like to welcome both those in the room and those joining us virtually to today's event. In the lead up to International Women's Day, we are gathering here to discuss both the opportunities and challenges women in Canada face when it comes to personal finance and wealth management. Studies project that by next year, women in Canada will inherit $900 billion in assets. This responsibility, coupled with an uncertain economic landscape and competing obligations, makes financial planning complex. Today's event will be focused on balancing finances and long-term goals for women at different stages of life. On behalf of the Globe and Mail, I'd like to recognize TD Bank for sponsoring today's event. Our first speaker is Christine Beasy, an ex-Bay Street veteran who now educates women about financial literacy. Today, she will be shedding light on the unique financial challenges that face women in Canada. Please join me in welcoming Christine Beasy to the stage. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you for that kind introduction. My name is Christine Beasy, and I'm the founder of Untangle Money. Show of hands, who here knows a woman who's intimidated by money? Well, that's not surprising, given that 87% of women want help with their money in Canada. This is a problem because $1 trillion is being transferred to women in the next decade. Ladies, we need to be comfortable with money. In my 20s, I was a national level athlete, and I liked to get tossed around by my partner. I was also an engineer who could design plant components for gas processing, but when it came to managing my money, I didn't know where to start. I didn't know who I should be talking to. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know anything. So I went to a bank, and I spoke to an advisor there. And for me, that was an awful experience. Didn't answer any of my questions. I went home feeling more confused than anything else. And I didn't, sadly, invest my money that day. But it sparked something inside of me. And I wanted to learn how to manage my money. So I went and read every letter to shareholder that Warren Buffett published. And I read every book that I got along the way, or got recommended to me along the way. I also got my MBA at Ivey, where I actually got a chance to meet Warren Buffett. And when I graduated, I worked on RBC's trading floor, and then I became a stock analyst for them out of the London, UK offices. When we moved back to Canada, I was a portfolio manager helping high net individuals manage their money. Along the way, I married the man of my dreams and my biggest cheerleader, and together we have 3 amazing kiddos. And now I'm the founder of Untangle Money, and we are focused on helping women figure out where to start with their money and focus on helping them make the financial choices that they face. We've worked with hundreds of men and women and non-binary folks. When we work with men, they often wonder about the quality of their retirement. What do you think women wonder about? They wonder if they need a roommate. They wonder what they can sustainably afford. They wonder how they'll be okay in the future. I want to pause here and mention that I don't have non-binary folks here or on future slides. That's because their financial experiences are very unique to them, but anecdotally, they are between men and women's experiences. Men and women have radically different financial lives. To illustrate this, let's look at Sandra and Owen. Statistically, Sandra is going to go into an industry that pays less overall. She'll get paid less for equal work, and she'll take time out for maternity and elder care responsibilities. She's also more likely to work part-time at some point in her life. These differences culminate into the gender wealth gap, which is that for every dollar Owen has in net wealth, Sandra has just 32 cents, and this gap is growing. With women's wealth at 32 cents on the dollar, it is no wonder that the largest investment manager on the planet says that the retirement crisis is a women's crisis. Now, everybody in this room has heard about the pay gap. For every dollar Owen earns, Sandra earns 87 cents. But what does this mean when it comes to our budget? So let's start with debt. I'm gonna add these red rectangles. Sorry, excuse me. Sandra has 8% more in debt, so we're gonna make that a little larger for her, thanks. Now we're gonna add an orange triangle, it's kind of pink, which represents cost of living. Oh, sorry, 1 second. We actually need, women pay the pink tax, so that's 43% more on things like toiletries. So we're gonna make hers a little larger, thanks, that's great. Research tells us that we need 20% of our money to spend on food, clothes, gifts, and critically, we need to find joy from this spend. Sorry, 1 second. Sandra earns less money, so 20% for her it's a little lower, so I'm just gonna make that turquoise box a little smaller, thank you. What's left over is what we have room for retirement savings. So that's the green boxes. This illustration does a good job of showing why single mothers have 8% of the wealth that single fathers have. Because after everything has been paid for, there just isn't enough money left over for a good nest egg. This illustration also helps to show us why financial decisions are so hard for most men, for most women, and for most non-binary folks. It's just challenging with these constraints. But it also shows us that women's situations are different. And this explains why money is women's #1 source of stress. We know that more and more people are helping their aging parents as they grow, as they age. Men help a little bit more financially, and women help more with care work, and this shows us why. But I want to take a moment and focus in on that orangey pink rectangle, which is the cost of living. A Black woman told us that hair maintenance isn't optional for her. Corporate Canada doesn't accept her natural hair. Lisa Laflamme would probably agree. When I worked at the Madison pub waiting tables, there was an appearance standards clause in my contract, and if I didn't meet that standard, I could be fired. These are real costs, and the emotional stress is real. We need to stop telling women that their wants are frivolous, while at the same time telling men that their wants are discerning. We need to stop telling women that skipping the manicure will pay for a retirement, especially when we know that most middle-income Canadians spend similarly. And research tells us that if some of our money doesn't go to joy, we will take on debt. In fact, we know that women and men spend an equal percentage on wants. Men spend more because they earn more. So on an absolute basis, men spend more on wants. So instead of focusing on what women need to do differently with their money, we need to focus on bringing pay equity up and bringing the pink tax down. Sadly, pay equity hasn't changed meaningfully in decades. While we wait for these structural and systemic changes to occur, we need to show women what they can do with a smaller retirement allocation, because this is the reality we exist in. Now, sadly, it's not just the pay gap for like jobs. It's going to get a little worse, and I promise it's going to get better. This graph shows the average Canadian salary for men and women. The green line, it's a little hard to see, on the top is men's average salary. The orange line underneath is women's average salary. Now I want you to notice that women's salaries peak around just after 40, whereas men's salaries keep rising and stay high for longer. The gray part along the bottom of the graph shows the difference between these averages, and it varies from $10,000 to $40,000 a year, each and every year, year after year after year after year, for all 40 years, and it continues into retirement where we earn less from corporate and Canadian pensions. If you have a bachelor's degree, this gap adds up to more than $1 million over the course of a career. Invested, $1 million makes a pretty comfortable retirement. It is no wonder that the World Economic Forum tells us that financial plans should look different for women and men given our different life cycles, noting that if women follow the same plan as a man, that they will fall short in retirement. And I want to say that again. If women use a plan made for a man, it will fail them. These financial realities are a big part of why, for all of you who had your hands up earlier, talking about money is really hard and it can be really uncomfortable. In fact, we know for women it's as uncomfortable to talk about money as it is for men to talk about other sensitive topics. But men know they can go to the doctor to get help. Where do women go? I've talked with hundreds of women who were unable to find the help they need in a style that they wanted. They didn't want to be sold to while they were asking questions, and they didn't want to worry about the conflict of interest. Are you doing this because it's in your best interest or in mine? We need to do better for the women in our lives when it comes to money, and it's time. Ladies, this won't be the first time we've shattered perceptions built by the status quo. We have broached societally uncomfortable conversations before, and we can do it again. Savage Fenty taught us to love our bodies, even if they didn't look like Victoria's Secret models. NYX taught us to embrace our menstrual and incontinence needs, despite these topics previously drowning us in shame. It is time for us to wear the pants in our relationship with money. I want you to leave here talking to every woman that you like and love about money. Talk to your friends and family about money. I want you to talk about your hang-ups about money. I want you to talk about how difficult it is to balance the financial needs of the now with the soon and the very seemingly far away future. And there is great news. Women are amazing with money. And I'm not saying this to disparage men, but rather to push back on the norm that women are bad with money. Women are better investors than our male counterparts. Every research paper that has looked at investment performance has found that women outperform men, and this happens at both the professional and the retail level. I find these headlines really funny, where it says, bottom right, why women may be better investors than men. But if you go on to read the article, it says that women earn better returns, women beat the market, and get wealthier faster than men, even in the year 2020, which was a really challenging year for investors. We may be better. It would be really helpful if the media stopped acting like women can't money, and they stopped being surprised when it turns out we're good at it. Women are better savers too. We save more money as a percentage of our salary than our male counterparts. We have less because we earn less and because we invest less. The fact that women are incredible investors and savvy savers is fantastic. This means we don't need women to act more like men. We just need to accentuate the things that we are already doing. So what can we do? What can Sandra do with that smaller retirement allocation while she waits for pay equity to go up and the pink tax to come down? Well, there are three things. She can start today. She needs to sit on less cash, and she needs to get her money working harder for her. Let's dive into these three things. Number one, start today. Our collective silence is extending this problem. We need to break the taboos around money, like it's impolite to talk about, so that we can get young women investing earlier. We need to tell the women of our lives what we learned here today and encourage them to get the information and the confidence they need to make better money decisions. And that doesn't mean waiting until you have lots of money. It means starting with where you're at today, whether you're in school, your first job, or your last job. Now is the time to have these conversations. So let's start. Put up your hand if you know how much money you need to have in the bank when you're 65 to retire. Okay, that's a lot more than we normally see, which isn't surprising given the audience here today, but it's normally less than 10%. Now, I normally like to ask 3 additional questions, which is, if you don't know where you're going, how do you know how to get there? If you don't know what you need, how do you know that you're doing enough today? What choices are you making without even realizing it? So everyone, today, whether it's during a break or tonight when you get home, I want you to go online and find an online retirement calculator and find out how much you need to retire or confirm how much you need for retirement. The other reason time starting today is important is because time is our best friend when it comes to money. And here's what I mean by that. This is Sandra's investing journey. And just to orient you a bit, the light gray part, this is what she needs for retirement. The green part is the retirement allocation. That's what she is contributing to. This is a little hard to see in pink. It's meant to be pink. This pink part is that money working for itself. The pink part is the investing returns. This is what people mean. It's this pink part that people mean when they say get your money working harder for you, or get your money working for you. And now I want to draw everybody's attention to the beginning. It is really hard to see any pink part in the first few years. It's important to know that investing feels futile for years, if not decades. Every year, I need to remind myself of this chart. I always think I can just catch up next year. It'll be fine. And every single year, I need to remind myself that this adds up to a lot of money over time. Sandra has $600,000 when she's 65 that she did not contribute herself. And let me tell you, it is really hard to find $600,000 in your couch cushions. 60% of Sandra's money that she has at retirement came from her money working for her. But she needs time to make this happen. Start today. So, number 2, sit on less cash. Why do I say this? If you've noticed the price of everything going up recently and your dollar's not going as far, that's because the purchasing power of your dollar is going down. This happens every year that there's inflation. You lose purchasing power every year. In fact, if your whole life the inflation rate was 2%, which is pretty normal, the dollar that you save when you're 20 years old is only going to buy you 25 cents worth of stuff when you're 90. And we ran Sandra's numbers. Sandra would have to save more than her take-home income in order to save her way for retirement. We cannot save our way into a funded retirement. We also know that women tend to sit on more money than men. We hold more cash. In our defense, the financial industry kind of tells us to, but new research shows that this might actually be bad advice. If you have a steady income, research shows that you, for this year, want to hold $4,450 maximum in cash. If you earn more than this per month, then it's your monthly take-home income in cash. So whichever is higher, max. Now that doesn't mean you don't need access to more money. It's where are you holding that money? We want it to be working for you while you wait for the rainy day. And I'm going to tell you what I mean about why do I say we want our money to getting harder for us. Well, our third point, getting our money to work harder for you. Women need to take more risk, or what I like to call time horizon-based investing. And this is what I mean. As women, we are both pushed into and drawn towards conservative and low-risk portfolios. This is our safe space. So most women end up roughly where Sandra is right here. This illustration shows a financial bouquet that is a balanced bouquet, which means that 50% of her financial flowers are stocks and 50% of her financial flowers are bonds. We estimate that she'll earn 4.5 cents on every dollar that's invested every year that it's invested. On the face of it, this doesn't seem so bad, right? Like, she has money until she's 88. But let's see what the Globe and Mail published a few years ago. If Sandra's alive at 65, there's more than a 50% chance that she'll still be alive at 90. This is why FP Canada wants us to use 95 for our life expectancy. So maybe Sandra wants a little more cushion than from 88 to 95. Maybe that's a little uncomfortable to be underfunded for that time. So let's get her money working a little harder for her before she retires. So I'm not talking about speculative investments here. It's not crypto. It's not the latest tech bro trend. This is just a growth bouquet of financial flowers where 85% of the flowers are in stocks and 15% of the flowers are in bonds. We estimate she's going to earn 7.5 cents on every dollar every year that it's invested. And now she has money until she's 95. The eagle-eyed amongst you might even notice that she didn't contribute as much money to get there. This is how we solve the fact that she has less money to allocate towards retirement. 85% of the money that she has at 65 was not money that she contributed. It came from her investment returns. When we talk about risk, we have to define the time horizon that we're talking about. We need to make sure our money is working hard enough to cover our whole lives, not the 5 years that is near-term focused. And this is aligned with how a financial professional would invest your pension. So in case some of you are sitting there being like, there's absolutely no way I would put 85% of my stocks into an investment, I just want to show you this. This is a guide that portfolio managers would use to help Sandra invest her money, and it's based on time to retirement. Time to retire is 0. The gray ones, counterintuitively, are stock flowers. The colorful ones are bonds. Gray, stocks, colorful bonds. Notice that until Sandra is 20 years away from retirement, or roughly 45 years old, so about my age, they will have 92% of Sandra's money in stock, an assortment of stock portfolios. And it's not until she's at retirement that they're going to put her in a 50-50 portfolio, a 50-50 bouquet. That's where most women are for most of their lives, or less. Ladies, it is time for us to get comfortable with risk, and we know that it's confidence that's holding us back. When women have more confidence with their money, they invest in a manner that's aligned with what a professional does. So let's practice and work on these 3 things. Starting today, we're going to talk about money. We're going to find out how much we need to retire. We're going to hold less cash, and we're going to get our money working harder for us. Ladies, we have a big challenge in front of us. As a group, we do not have enough money to properly save and invest for retirement. The good news is that women are incredible investors and savvy savers. We have shattered perceptions built by the status quo before. And when it comes to our money, our future, and our confidence, we are in control of powering ourselves. And it starts here with all of you today. Today, I am appointing you all champions of the money conversation. And it is incumbent upon all of you to pass the torch forward so that we can pass these flames to other women so that we can all live in a brighter world. My name is Christine Beasy. I am the founder of Untangle Money, and I'm on a mission to change the world of finance for women. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Thank you, Christine. That was so great. Our next discussion will be focused on practical solutions for navigating common financial scenarios, and we'll definitely go over some of what Christine just discussed. Please join me in welcoming Francine Bernstein, Vice President and Head of Financial Planning at TD, Eva Sachs, who is a divorce financial consultant, and Elke Rubach, President of Rubach Wealth. Thank you all for joining me today. See if the mic is working. Yep, great. All right, so let's start with a little introduction. Can each one of you tell us a little bit about what you do and critically why you do it?
Sure. I'll go first. Hi, everyone. I'm Francine Bernstein, and I am the head of financial planning at TD Wealth. And actually, I'm looking around the room as I say this, and there are so many leaders and planners from TD in the room, so thank you all for coming. Great to see you. Why I do what I do? I would say my career has been serendipitous, so I wouldn't say that it was intentional about me being in this role, leading a team of 1,200 financial planners across Canada. But as I was thinking about my passion for women, women's managing their finances, taking control of their finances, and I thought about what brings me here. I think about my upbringing and my mom and the role model that she was. And my parents divorced when I was 12 years old. 40 years later, they can tolerate each other, but it was a really, really messy many years, and so Eva, we'll talk later. But my mother, I have two older sisters, and my mother taught us some really important lessons, and there are three that stick with me always. The first is to be financially independent, and the importance of having your own money and knowing what to do with your own money. And which ties into the second, which is really to understand money and know how to manage money, how to save money. And the third, which is maybe the most important lesson, she always used to say to my two older sisters and me, my brother was too young to get in the middle of anything, but she would say, you girls need to stick together, and you girls need to lift each other up. And so I think that's a really important lesson that has carried with me and is why I have so much passion about women's issues, kind of in my discretionary effort around what I do. I'll leave it at that.
The mic's working. My name is Eva Sachs, and I'm something called a divorce financial consultant, which is a relatively new role. And so what does that mean? So if we think of divorce, we think of really money and kids, and that's what it comes down to. And so when people, I think, are contemplating divorce, certainly, they're not necessarily thinking initially about, how does the law work and what support, et cetera. They're thinking of things like, can I afford to keep the house? Do I have to go back to work? How is this going to affect my retirement? Will the kids still be able to be in the activities like hockey, dance, and all the rest of that? And so that's really the answers that I can provide to the clients that I end up working with. Why do I do this? I've been married for a very long time. This is more gray hair than it is blonde, probably. And people always wonder, well, you must be doing this because you've had your own horrible divorce story. And I haven't. I think I live in this bubble where that hasn't affected me. But I know that people that come to me never planned on getting divorced. And they're there either because different issues have come up, but they never planned on doing this. And I recognized I could be at that table facing somebody like me just as easily as they did. So my work and the reason I do this is to understand and to provide compassion for the people that are going through this, certainly from the women's perspective, financial clarity for what they're looking at, because certainly, as I said, the money issues are big issues in separation divorce.
Hello, everyone. My name is Elke Rubach. I'm the founder of Rubach Wealth. I'm a reformed lawyer, started the firm 12 years ago with the idea of helping people get their house in order. I work with incredibly talented men and women who focus on building wealth, but naturally or accidentally miss those little details that put the success at risk. There's not one single person I've worked with that hasn't overlooked the little details that puts everything in a crumble situation. Things happen, life goes fast, and it's not because of intellect or incompetence. a natural thing we do is neglect ourselves. We're building our careers, we're building our assets, we're building our world, we're looking after our kids, we're looking after our community, and we come last. And that happens to women a lot. So what we do is we work with individuals, making sure that those elements that could put their houses at risk stay together. Why I do that? Serendipity. Not necessarily because I believe that men and women are better or worse, different. I don't believe in that war at all. I have 2 sons and a daughter, so I'm hoping that all of them have the same chance. But when I was little, obviously my parents hadn't planned. My dad thought that my mom had it. My mom thought that my dad had it. And in reality, nobody had it. And he died when he was 50. And we had assets, and they started disappearing. And as a kid, you're just seeing things fly over your head. And it's a level of noise that honestly bothered me because kids don't deserve that. So I come from a kid's perspective, making sure that they're not put through stress. I'm not saying coddling, but not stress when things change. And there's change that comes with humanity, and it's not just divorce. It could be death, it could be a career change, it could be a change of plans, change of mind, and you have to build in the flexibility to have that. And independence is financial or non-existent. So boys and girls, women and men need to build for the future, have to have long-term plans because things will change. So that's why I do it.
Thank you so much. So I wanted to start by discussing a pattern that I come across often when I speak to sources and when I speak to financial advisors, which is often this attitude from women who are, attuned to personal finance. Like they think about money, they don't shy away from talking about money, but I find often, not always, but often they're very, very focused on budgeting and saving. And investing is almost treated as this like personal finance plus advanced, maybe I'll leave it to my husband. And often when you talk to, and it might be very fearful about investing. Whereas when you speak about, the husbands in heterosexual relationships or the partners, then you feel like men are much more likely to lean into investing and to take on risks, which can be its own issue, overconfidence in investing. But I'm wondering if you've come across this issue and if you can each discuss like how you help women sort of navigating this maybe instinctive attitude that they have. So let's start with Eva, and then we'll go on to Francine, and then Elke.
Certainly, I agree with you. The female clients that I see often will say things like, well, there's no way I can negotiate this agreement because my husband is so much more advanced, has so much more knowledge on investments. They tend to say, yes, I can understand budgets, but the investing thing they've always left to their spouses. So I certainly agree with you from that perspective. What I tell those clients is it's not rocket science, as much as all financial advisors may think that we're really brilliant and smart, but there is information out there. And certainly a lot of what I hear is the financial advisors that they're working with is one that the spouses share, and maybe they don't have a good relationship with them or a direct relationship with them. So I always advise my female clients that I see is as they're going through separation and divorce and as they get closer to the end, to reach out and find a financial advisor that they think will be a good fit for them. Not for us, because there's no more us, but for them.
So I recently heard it referred to as the barbecue syndrome, which I don't think it needs any explanation, and it's absolutely what we read in the research and what we see across the country and in the conversations that our financial planners are having. And so it's not that women aren't capable of investing and managing their finances. It's that we have so much on our plates that we're really happy and comfortable to just let the man in our life or anyone else who would actually step up and take care of it to do so. And we recognize that at TD. And what we do is we train, and actually someone we work closely with is here in the room today, and we train our advisors in order to be sensitive to that tendency with women. And so if you're meeting with a financial planner and a couple is meeting with a financial planner, we've trained our financial planners to draw the woman into the conversation and to not have them just accept to defer to whoever they're comfortable to defer to. And so, we're really focused on financial well-being, and that involves both financial education and financial advice. And in order to have that conversation around financial education, we need to make sure that we're making it safe for the woman to ask questions and, to ask what they believe to be the stupid questions, which are oftentimes the best questions. And it's so important because, and so if I come back to your question, you asked about budgeting versus investing. And it's really a question of short-term priorities versus longer-term priorities. And we saw Christine did such a great job of depicting how important it is to be focused on the long-term investing and to be prepared for retirement. And we worry about that for our clients at TD because 80% of women are likely to be the sole financial managers in their life over their lifetime, at some point over their lifetime. And 60% of women don't have a financial plan. So that is what we do. We'll invite the woman into the conversation. We'll lead with a financial plan in terms of looking at every element of their priority in terms of short-term, medium-term, and long-term financial management. And then we help them support managing that plan.
I agree with both of you. What we do is we look at wealth management from a holistic perspective. We will get to investing, but what we do is we're not here to judge. Every family has their own dynamics. What we're trying to understand is what their financial philosophies are. And ultimately, again, it's not a matter of capacity. The difference between men and women is the legacy of their training in financial management. Historically, men have more experience, so they're more comfortable in it, right? But once that you show a female advisor client, investor or client or whatever the situation is, that it's not rocket science and that they can too learn and practice and feel comfortable asking questions. The only rule we have is that there are no dumb questions. It's just something that you've never been exposed to. If the dynamic of a family is that he runs the finances, that's fine. But you need to know what's going on. Not because he's going to cheat on you, not because he's going to leave you, not because he dies, what do? He's disabled. Are you prepared? How do you show your kids that dad no longer can make decisions and you can? The last thing you want to do is learn as you deal with a crisis. So you don't have to run it, but you need to know what's going on. And you need to feel comfortable asking questions and leading the family with, I don't know what I don't know, but now that I don't know, I'm uncomfortable and I will learn. So that's one thing. The second thing is kids are watching. And if we really truly want parity between sexes or genders or whatever the right term is, we need to lead by example. And we need to show our daughters that it's okay to ask. And we need to show our sons that they need to know. And we need to stop the war between men and women because that's not advancing the case anywhere on earth. So that's the other one. And ultimately, it's practice. You are, as you say, 80% of women will end up deciding. Think of this as a marathon. You can either start training for the marathon you know you're going to have to run, or you can have to run the marathon tomorrow. You have no choice. And assuming you don't have a heart attack in the process, the next day you're not going to be feeling really well. It's going to hurt a lot. So you can either train for those 42 kilometers or you can run them the next day and see how that goes.
Thank you. Moving forward, Francine, I wanted to ask you about having kids in heterosexual couples. We've seen, in those graphs that Christine was showing us, right? Like the earnings take a dip, right? There's parental leave, which thankfully is now much more divided, a little bit more equally divided between the two parents sometimes. And there's also might be many years in which women scale back, right? Like step back from their career, part-time work, or maybe less demanding schedules because the kids are small. And I often find that during that period, retirement contributions also drop and sometimes they go to zero. Whereas, with the Bell Partners, retirement contributions sail through. So can you tell us a little bit about how you talk to clients about handling those years?
Sure. So I'm not talking directly to clients, and so maybe I'll just share my own personal story. I have 2 children. They're 23 and 21, and so back in my day, there was no, men weren't taking part of the leave, and we had a year, and I was anxious about being out of the workforce, and so in, both times I took 8 months and 9 months. I was anxious to be back in as well, part of my character. But one of the things that my husband and I talked about before we had children was how we were going to manage the contributions when I was off. And, we always say RSP contributions, but we also have TFSA. And so we had agreed that so long as his income could afford, he would be contributing to both his own TFSA as long as giving me money to contribute to mine. And his RSP contributions were split. So, the room that I had for RSP contributions, he put part of his contributions into mine. And so there's lots of ways that you can get at it, and no 2 situations are alike. So it's not a one-size-fits-all scenario, but it's something that you want to be talking about before you're in the situation. And that's where just healthy conversation is so important, and I think Christine touched on that too.
And a follow-up for you. Are there other financial challenges that commonly come up around parental leave?
I can list a long list of non-financial challenges: sleep deprivation, brain fog, depression. But I think, the other financial challenge is that you're stepping away from the workforce, and you're stepping away from what are the impacts? And there too, I think as a society, we've come a long way. I know, when I think about working at TD now and things that I've seen along the way, where I've seen a woman who's 7 months pregnant be promoted before she's going off on leave and coming back to a more senior role. So I think we've had a lot of progression. I still, despite that, I wouldn't say that women don't worry about the impact on their career when they're stepping away from work. And it's a privilege to be home with children and to have that luxury. But I think they worry about what does it mean for their longer term career and earning potential.
Evan, Elke, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the magic lies in open communication within the couple. There's no right solution for everyone. We can't generalize. I say if you use the same blanket to try to cover everyone, some toes will be uncovered and some people will be choking. So it's really, if you have an open conversation, you normalize the money conversation with a couple, and you look forward, you're reading from the same book. The worst thing you can do is assume that you had it, I had it, nobody had it, because already staying at home with the kids is a massive responsibility. And your ideas can get clouded, and it's stressful, and the kid gets cold, and then you have to pick them up from daycare, the real life. But whatever the couple agrees to, and that has these conversations on an ongoing basis, and that's where advisors can play a massive role, or should play a massive role, is, hey, what's going on, what's new? Is this arrangement still working for you? How are your contributions? Should we consider this? I mean, at the end of the day, it's a tax efficiencies play. If you're tax efficient, you're ahead of the curve, right? But respectfully saying, is this working for the family? Do you feel comfortable? Is everyone aware of what's going on? Great. No, let's change it. And that's why I'm a big, big, big fan of prenups and cohabitation agreements. If you don't need it, great. But if you do, then it's a bit more comfortable for the couple. And for me, the most valuable part is that people get practice in talking about finances and how things could look going forward with the help of a professional, a lawyer, a family lawyer in this case, who's seen enough that can give some guidance to the couple while they still love each other.
I'll just comment quickly, and on the other side of things, I certainly see many situations where there isn't this balance, where they haven't contributed well enough, whether through spousal RSP, somebody has a big pension and somebody else doesn't. So I see this real imbalance, certainly when they're now separating and looking at what their retirement is going to look like. If the plan was their retirement based on household investments, household pensions, RSPs, and now it's separating out. it comes quite as a shock. And as I say to a lot of the clients I see, you know, how romantic is it, you know, that you're going to come home and say to your husband, or even your husband or spouse, whoever has maybe more financial knowledge or has the bigger pension plan, yeah, let's crack open a glass of wine and let's read through my pension plan and company benefits. Really? Most people would say, no, we'll watch the hockey game instead, or I'll make something else. So these conversations, as much as we say should happen, I'm not convinced they help. They do, or not enough, certainly.
And Elke, I wanted to, along sort of the same, similar topic, so I wanted to talk about that other dip in earnings that we saw on that curve that Christine showed, right? That tends to happen sort of later on, and it still has to do with caregiving, but it starts to being like caregiving of elderly parents. And I've heard so many, not only does that responsibility overwhelmingly fall on women, but I've also heard so many stories of women who wound up doing the caregiving not only for their own parents, but for their in-laws. So I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about how you help women who find themselves in that situation navigate it.
Absolutely, and it's happening more and more because people are living more and more, and parents are living longer, but not necessarily in the best of shape. I'm seeing a lot of Alzheimer's and dementias and so on, and those are really tough to navigate. Goes back to the basics. Sit down with your spouse, and whatever works and makes sense for you, if you're going to take a sidestep, see it as something temporary. This is not a life sentence. Neither the parents are going to live forever, nor the kids are going to be babies forever. And whatever you agree to, make sure that you have periodical conversations with your spouse and say, listen, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I feel I'm not as informed as I should be. Really, it's up to you to take ownership of your financial security, whether you're, you know, in this lower end snack bracket or very, very rich or whatever it is. You need to gain the peace of mind that you can have that conversation with your spouse. The last thing you want to do is, no, I'm not going to look after my parents because my earnings will dip. The regret that may come from that, I don't think enough money would pay for. So it's really, see it differently. You have the privilege to look after your parents or his parents, and ideally, again, you like your mother-in-law. But it's really, it's a human need. It's real, and you don't want human regret for financial reasons. But if you're aware of what's going on and the couple is talking, everything goes.
Can I add on this one? Yeah. So I think it's really important. I would say I empathize in this situation. I have parents in their 80s and very much understand the burden of caring for aging parents. And as a working mom and a working daughter, I have to say, some days it's very hard to work and be your best at work when you know that your parents are at home or you're worried about your parents. And so it's really important to take that time out and reflect and recognize, are you actually giving your best self to work when you're trying to care for your parents at the same time? And so my recommendation would be to really understand the programs that your corporations offer to you, because I think programs have become more and more sophisticated and there's likely options for you. So I would say first and foremost, do your research and understand what your options are. And the second thing is, you know, I have a big family, as I've mentioned. I have a wonderful partner. Everyone has emotion in it. And so to be able to sit down with someone like your financial advisor or your financial planner and model out what it's going to mean for your income in the short term and for your finances in the long term is really, really valuable. And we know that you're 3 times less likely to have a good night's sleep if you're worried about financial stress. And so going into that financial plan and running the stress scenarios, which most softwares will support, is just really wonderful and will offer you peace of mind such that you can do what you need to do in the moment without sacrificing or compromising your career or your finances.
Now, a question for you, Eva. So I want to talk about, we're seeing increasingly instances of gray divorce, so people getting divorced later in life. And you had told those before that these divorces tend to be a bit more amicable. So can you tell us a little bit about what you were seeing in gray divorces?
In gray divorce, we're finding that people just grow apart. We think about all sorts of reasons why people divorce, you know, addictions, affairs, you know, salacious things that we see in movies and so on. But for the most part, we're seeing these gray divorces as just people growing apart. And from a female perspective, there was a number of different reasons why this was happening. Number one, just females' financial independence and social independence. Right? It's okay, Golden Girls pictures, it's okay to be with a group of women. If we go to a restaurant and we're seeing groups of women or theater or even travel, so somebody might look across their dining room table and look at their spouse and say, what do I need you for? And yet I have another good 20, 30 plus years. Do I really want to spend them with you? So that's part of the rationale. And the other thing, I wrote a book about gray divorce a number of years ago with a colleague, and one of the interesting research things that we found out was that part of the motivation for gray divorce was online dating. The idea that if I'm divorcing in my 60s or 70s, I won't necessarily be alone, and it's much easier maybe, not so much partner up, but to find somebody else to be with. So I found that fascinating. The challenges and what we're hearing in gray divorce, I'm going to say from females, as much as the statistics tell us that from a financial perspective they're going to be worse off, they're prepared to do that anyways. And they're prepared to say, okay, I can learn what I need to learn if they haven't been financially savvy. They're really good clients for financial advisors because they're eager to learn and understand and realize what they've missed and what they need to be doing. And also, just from the perspective of managing the rest of their lives, if they were thinking of downsizing anyways, so the concerns about housing maybe aren't as great. And so, you know, what I find with gray divorces, it really ends up being more a financial issue and concern with a little bit of legal concerns, versus when somebody's divorcing earlier in life, the legal issues and concerns are greater, and the financial planning piece sort of is secondary.
It's really interesting. Francine and Malcolm, I want to going back yet again to that chart, right? So we saw, you know, overall, women are likely to have fewer earning years, more years of, even those years more than maybe with part-time work. Then we have the gender pay gap, but on the other hand, like the part that we didn't get to see after that line, and there's retirement, and that period is likely to be longer for women than for men, because you know we tend to have longer life expectancy. So how do you help with trying to match like that roller coaster ride during the earning years and that long period after retirement?
Well, at the end of the day, it's a financial plan, and any advisor who's worth his weight knows that you have to plan for a longer lifespan than just 85 or 65 or whatever the gap is for women and men. I really don't want to tell my clients in their last 3 years, oops, you ran out of money. How do you feel about finding a job at Home Depot, right? It's not good. So the plan has to work, 95, 100. Ask the family, is your mom still around? I have clients that the mom's 103, 105, and they're still around, and they're still in good shape, right? So it's really, that's the magic of a strong relationship with a financial advisor, somebody who's going to take the time to really understand your family, your dynamics, and how it works. The plan should work for men and women, and we want to do conservative plans that under-promise and over-deliver than, promise 20% return tax-free, and that will take you to, I don't know. So be realistic, be analytical, and you have to build in flexibility because life changes. And the other thing that you might live longer, but how's your health? And that's a very personal conversation because everybody has to decide why and how they want to live and what meaning they want to give to their wealth and what retirement means for them. And then you can roughly have a calculation. But a plan is not a set and forget. Those plans need to be visited every 6 months, every year. And we want to hear from our clients. I sold a house, I had a kid, I split up, like all those changes that affect the plan, you need to be in the know.
And sorry, I have to interrupt, very sorry, but we urgently need a car moved. It's a silver Lexus NX 350 CWPJ 581. Do we have anyone with a silver Lexus here? Okay, okay. Okay, Francine, did you want to jump in?
So I would say the very same thing. I would sum it up, though, as you start early and refresh often. I was at a TD client event in Montreal last summer at the Jazz Festival, and I was being introduced to one of our planners' clients, and the client said to me, I'm from TD. I proudly said, I'm from TD and I just retired and now I have a new financial planner. And it was like, oh gosh, you should have had a financial planner 35 years ago and you work at the bank, you should know. So my number one piece of advice is engage early. Find a planner, know what you want, because you have to put your goals on paper. And again, the short term, the medium term, the long term. But there are tax strategies that you want to employ in your 30s and 40s in your big income earning years. And it's not something, if you wait until you're 65, like you've waited too long, or 70 or 80, whatever it is. So the things that we do with our clients when we're building a financial plan, it's not just about accumulating wealth and saving for the future and the education that I talked about earlier. It's thinking about what's the legacy that you want to leave. When you think about passing wealth down to your children or looking after your parents, what are the scenarios that you worry about, and what are the things that we need to think about? As well as really tackling some of the conversations that people don't like talking about. Do you have a will? And do you have power of attorney? Have you identified a trusted contact person? What is a trusted contact person? And all of this really matters in terms of your financial well-being and keeping your plan in check from your 30s through to your 90s or whenever it is that you're going to live until.
Great. And I wanted to go back to Eva and talk about divorce, but divorce and housing. Divorce is, challenging enough, but with the kind of housing affordability challenges that we have here in Toronto, but honestly in so many markets in Canada, I'm hearing more and more stories of couples who are separated or even divorced, still living under one roof because no one can afford to move out, or they're trying to move out and suddenly they have to go from a detached house to a basement apartment to be able to live where the kids are going to school. So can you tell us a little bit about some savings options that people may not be aware of that can maybe help them with this housing piece of the puzzle?
Absolutely. So there's two issues. It's either if somebody's keeping the house and therefore likely that they have to pay their spouse some kind of cash payment over and above any kind of equalization payment, or if the house is sold and they're both now in the marketplace looking for a house. So again, when you take that one household, one joint expense that they've had, now separating it into two, and now the expenses are not half, but certainly greater. And so looking at what that is. So for the people that want to, whether they want to stay in their own house, so understanding how they might finance that payment, so understanding what their options are in terms of mortgage qualifications. Do they qualify? They're all excited about saying, yes, I've done my math, and on the back of the envelope, and I figured out I can make the monthly payments. Great. But will somebody lend you the money? Do you now qualify for the amount that you need once you're on your own? Depending on the financial institution, from my experience, some financial institutions will include receipts of child and or spousal support as part of income qualification for mortgages. Others don't, so there's challenges around that. It also depends on the length of time for some institutions of how long some of these support payments have come to them, so there may be a delay in providing mortgage financing. And then the other thing that I think is helping certainly a lot of people going through divorce is the Tax Act now allows anybody that's gone through separation divorce be treated as a first-time home buyer and can access up to $60,000 from their RSP. So that's a huge bonus in terms of finding money for adding to, let's say, whatever mortgage they do or do not qualify for.
Can I just jump in?
Absolutely.
One piece of advice, and what we tell our clients is, from the minute you're able, particularly as a spouse who's not working or a young citizen, get your own credit card and build credit. Because the number of cases we've come across where she had a secondary card to him, and then they split up, and the banks are like, you're lovely, but I don't know you from a credit perspective. That's a big problem. So get your own credit card and service it obviously properly. Don't spend what you can't afford, but really build credit, because again, you may never need it. Hopefully you'll never need it, but what if?
Very true. That's something I come across also all the time. Finally, I wanted to talk about the generational wealth transfer in Canada. This is obviously can look very different for different families, but one of the things we do know is that women in Canada stand to inherit almost $1 trillion in family assets in the next few years. What are the biggest challenges you see tied to this? And let's start with Francine, and then Eva and Elke.
So it comes back to the barbecue syndrome. Something my two older sisters are divorced too, and so we talk a lot about learned helplessness and the things that you choose not to be a part of, the conversations you choose not to be a part of, and then you're left having those conversations and being unprepared. And one of the statistics that hasn't come up yet is that the average female Canadian widow is 56. So we need to be ready. And so how do we make sure that we're ready? It's about talking about money. And in my house, my children, like, they know any question they ask us about money, we will answer. How much do we earn? What do we plan to do in retirement? What would we do if we won the lottery? What would we do if one of us lost our jobs? And really just talking openly about money and understanding money, both for ourselves and for our children. You mentioned the intergenerational wealth transfer. There's a lot of articles around jackpot generation and the concerns around children inheriting money and not knowing what to do with money. And there's lots of opportunities. Christine chose to educate herself. We can educate our children. There are, events that lots of companies put on, including TD, where you can bring your children and bring your children into the conversation with your advisor and to events to help educate. But we really, you don't want to be in that circumstance where you're left to manage money and you're ill-prepared. So get involved in the conversation now, both for yourself and for your loved ones.
I'll try and answer that by giving you an example. So whether you know it or not, but money that's inherited is typically not included when we're dividing property in separation divorce. So it can't be commingled, it has to be kept in a separate account. I had a situation where a couple is dealing with the stress of renovation, and we know how stressful that can be. So the inheritance that she got went all into the renovation of their house. Why wouldn't it? You've got a windfall, so whether you're putting it on your mortgage or a renovation, in this case, it went into the renovation of the house, and all of her inheritance went in there. 2 months later, they decide that this isn't working anymore, and they're separating. She no longer has that inheritance deductibility. And so when we say it's hers, it really isn't anymore. And not to say that she wouldn't do that. Like, why would you? You've got concerns. So I would say most people that are getting an inheritance, certainly at younger ages, are likely to put it into their mortgage or something like a renovation, as opposed to putting it into a separate account. So they just need to be aware of that, and maybe not all of it goes into that one pot, and maybe some of it stays in a separate account maybe it's the emergency fund, maybe it's something to top up retirement savings at some point. So I would say from a financial planning perspective, it shouldn't be all or nothing.
And what I would add is, it's the same analogy of the marathon. The intergenerational wealth transfer is happening, so we either train for it or it's going to hurt. And we know that when money drops into families and they're not prepared, there are other level of complexities that kick in, and then they're a whole nother story. But the other thing too is for business owners, I constantly drill, you need to tell your family how you got here, because for the family, dad or mom were successful. But if you don't share with them the days you had bad days, the days you couldn't make payroll, the days you slept in the car because something went wrong or something, that's how short sleeves to short sleeves comes to life. It's not that your kids are dumb. If you have not talked to them about money, how do you expect them to know? So practice it. And if you don't know how to start, that's where financial advisors come in. That's our job. That's really how you earn your job and the title of financial advisor versus salesperson. It's really caring for the family, going deep, understanding the personalities, and teaching them that money's not the devil, and it's a fact of life, and some have more, some have less. Don't compare yourself to the others. Follow your own, understand what's important to you, because if you try to follow your buddy's advice, there's a good chance that your buddy's advice doesn't fit your reality. So really take responsibility, show your kids that they can, trust them, give them a shot, and believe in them, because they're little, but they're not dumb, or they're young, but they're not dumb. So if you truly believe that you want to give meaning to your wealth, normalize the money conversation in your family, and then that's when real equity will happen between everyone.
Perfect. So we have a few minutes left, so I wanted to open it to the floor for audience questions. So if you have a question for Eva, Elke, or Francine, please raise your hand and someone will come with a microphone.
Hi. In terms of two trends, apparently I haven't spoken much today. In terms of two trends that are happening in the market, one, that fewer women are getting married, and two, that women are getting put out to pasture out of the workforce earlier than ever before and not making it to 65 in the workforce. What advice do you give to women, and how does that change the approach that you recommend to them for financial planning?
Okay, so again, we see that a lot also with mandatory retirement. It's going to happen at some point. Somebody will retire somehow, somewhere. The only thing you can do is keep a skill set alive, whatever that is. And even at an executive level, COVID taught us that you can have online presence, you can do fractional work. Keep your network, keep your community together, because that's really who's going to be there for you when you need them. But by the same token, while you're in the workforce, make sure you mentor and push people up.
Have a plan B. Like when we talk to our clients about the financial plan and we do the stress scenarios, those doomsday scenarios, it's like you want the playbook for your doomsday scenario, so that when you find yourself in that situation and you can't think straight, that you have somewhere to go to, it won't be 100%, but have that plan B.
Hi there. I'm having an aha moment with this conversation. It's so refreshing, particularly the piece around being transparent with our kids around money. And my aha moment is, like, we have two boys, 8 and 10, and like when they start asking about money, something happens where my husband and I feel like we need to not give them detail. And I'm just curious, what guidance you have around how to have that conversation, and curious also, where does that come from, if you have any insight into that, reserving that information from our kids?
I'll add to the latter part. It comes from my parents, because we grew up in where it was cancer at the table, and so we didn't talk about money. We didn't talk about bad things, and where does it come from in my household? My husband and I both have worked for a bank for the last 20 to 30 years, so it's in our DNA. And I think if you're not comfortable talking about your personal money, like one of the things that my father did with me that I try and instill with my children is, I don't have a belief that whatever I have, they should have. And, you know, my daughter's in Australia for the semester this semester, and it was very clear that she had to go and get a job as a host or have, you know, have the money for the weekend jaunts to Bali or New Zealand, wherever she decides to go. And so we're privileged, and we'll get her to a certain point, and then she needs to have so she needs to know what a budget is, and she needs to have her own money. And you try and instill, you know, knowledge and then good values.
Wish for the best then. And the other thing too is you can't talk to the same to all kids the same way. My eldest kid is super responsible, squared, understands, asks questions, so on. The second one, if he could buy hot chocolate for the planet, he would. And my third just needs to make sure she makes it to the Taylor Swift concert. So they're very different. I think you have to try it. A few years ago, I was part of an initiative by Advocates, the industry association, and we did a really cute financial planning certificate for kids. It's really for like elementary school, where you talk to them about cash flow, and you talk to them about insurance and investing and philanthropy, and little by little, but also open the forum for questions, because probably they don't need to know about synthetic options. They're probably asking, can I buy my toy? Should I save? Should I give my money away? Can I invest? So really, every kid is different. So you but just open up the forum and say, hey guys, what do you know about money? And then you'll learn from them a lot more.
Hello. In the case of, God forbid, my husband passed, and I feel I'm informed based on our household finances, but I'm not the lead. He is the one who takes the lead. I'm completely fine with that. But he also has a relationship with our financial advisor that I don't. So in the case if, obviously, I would have to move forward without him, there's probably a good chance I would want to forge a relationship with a female. No offense to men, but I would probably go that route. What is that process to make that change later in life?
I mean, research would tell us that you're not alone, and that most of the time, I don't know the exact percentage, is a high percentage, more than 75% of women, when they find themselves alone, they want to change advisors. And so it's just a matter of speaking to, like if you were at TD, you would speak to the team manager to say you're interested in working with someone else. Or even approaching, like I actually don't even know, maybe someone here would have a better answer from TD, but you know, you would talk to your advisor and say, you would start with your advisor and say, I'm looking for something different.
Right. And are there any, we tried to do this with my mom, and when my dad passed, and the person that she was with at the time, there were stipulations, like there was charges that would be laid for her portfolio if they were pulled, or I can't even explain it properly. There's all these sort of things that would happen from a financial perspective. So we decided to stay, and we've worked with that individual ever since. But is there any sort of like dings that happen financially if you switch over?
Absolutely, it's your money, period.
Right.
And you're entitled to ask as many questions as you need to feel comfortable. And I would say start early. You know, everything, your husband's alive and everything's well. But start early and reach out, and you can talk to your current advisor. And if something sometimes it's a chemistry thing. Like when we have conversations with our clients and we say, you know what, maybe we're not the right fit, but I'm happy to recommend you to someone that I think you would totally hit it off.
Right.
This might be too technical, but there could be consequence if you're moving from one institution to another because of proprietary product.
Yeah.
But but you should be able to choose the advisor that works best for you.
Okay.
Yeah, and then you make an informed decision when you know what the cost is, and you say yay or nay.
Yeah. Fair enough. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're all out of time. Unfortunately, there's so many hands still. But Eva, Francine, and Elke, thank you so much for joining us today. And now we're about to head into a 20-minute networking break, so we'll see you back here at 2:20.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're just about to get started. If everyone can take their seats, please. Okay, welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the networking break. And a reminder, we're going to have another networking break for our live audience right after this. If you didn't have an opportunity, you have an opportunity right after the event today. I'm Deanne Gage. I'm the Globe Advisor reporter at the Globe and Mail, and I'm pleased to be moderating the second half of the event. Through the first half of the event, we've heard some great strategies related to personal finance and managing competing pressures on your finances. Now we're going to shift gears to talk about another important issue, and that is how to protect your physical and mental health and wellness as you navigate life, work, caregiving, and other responsibilities. We have a great group of experts to talk about that, so let's introduce them. First, we have Wagani Falate, co-founder and MD at Lume Women Plus Health. Wagani is an adult respirologist and a sleep medicine physician. Welcome, Wagani. And joining us virtually, we have Dr. Kati Kamkar, a clinical psychologist. Kati has nearly 17 years of service at CAMH in Toronto. She's also associate professor at the University of Toronto. Welcome, Kati. And also joining us virtually is Dr. Vivian Brown, family physician and author of The New Women's Guide to Healthy Aging. Welcome, Vivian.
Thank you so much.
So, Kati, let's start with you. One of the big pressures on our mental health as women is something you call unhealthy perfectionism. Can you please explain what that means?
Absolutely wonderful events. And this question is very important because when we talk about unhealthy perfectionism, it's a type of perfectionism that creates this constant pressure, unrealistic expectations, and of course, this fear of failure. And it is particularly challenging for a woman, right? Because as societal and cultural norms often might push us, right, to excel in multiple roles, whether it's in career and family, relationships, our personal appearance, while also making it seem like anything less having it all together, again, is a failure. So unlike healthy perfectionism, which can motivate us to do our best, unhealthy perfectionism is driven by this self-criticism, this fear of not being good enough. I'm not good enough. And this unrelenting need to meet this impossible standards. And it can lead, right, to burnout, to anxiety, to this reduced sense of self, our self-esteem, because again, no matter how much I can achieve, it again never feels enough. So some key signs of unhealthy perfectionism that we might want to really appreciate here and to be aware of can include setting excessively high and rigid standards, or this constant self-criticism, right? Even after successes, fear of making a mistake or being judged, struggling to celebrate accomplishments, no matter how small or big, avoiding challenges for the fear again that I'm going to fail, or feeling that my sense of self and my self-worth is tied to productivity and the final outcome and achievement. So for women, of course, this pressure can be exacerbated by, let's say, workplace expectations, caregiving responsibilities, societal ideals around appearance and success. So overcoming this unhealthy perfectionism involves really shifting from self-criticism to self-compassion. How can I set realistic goals and allowing for imperfection is, again, as part of our growth, personal, professional, academic, psychological, emotional growth. So it's really around learning to embrace the good enough rather than chasing, again, always this unattainable ideal.
Thank you. And Kati, just staying with you for a moment. What are a few ways that women can develop healthy perfectionism or strike a better balance?
Exactly, right? Yes, you're right about this, right? For us to consider. So managing and reducing this unhealthy perfectionism requires us, it's a shift, right? It's a shift in our mindset, self-compassion. And self-compassion, again, is a relationship with the self, especially during difficult time, right? And how can we implement those practical strategies? So there are lots here. But I'm just going to summarize a few. Number one, as we just started talking, it's shifting from self-criticism to self-compassion. So instead of constantly judging myself for not, meeting this impossible standard, I want to work on practicing self-kindness. Ask yourself, would I say this to a friend? If not, why am I saying this to myself? So treating myself with the same care and understanding that I would offer to others. Second, how can I redefine success and productivity, right? Unhealthy perfectionism often is tied to self-worth, to achievement. So here I want to redefine success as my progress, effort, learning, regardless of the outcome. A lot of times we do not have control over the final outcome, right? So instead of asking, do I do it perfectly? How about I ask myself, what did I learn from this invaluable experience that can help me today and tomorrow move forward? Third, setting realistic and flexible goals, right? How can I focus on achievable, balanced goals? As we say, the SMART goals, right? Making sure it's specific, it's measurable, it's attainable, it's realistic, and it's time bound, right? Because often perfection is an illusion, but progress is real. Fourth, challenging again, my perfectionistic thinking, right? How can I go from this all or none thinking, if it's not perfect, I'm a failure, to maybe reframing it in a way that maybe, again, it's doing more justice to me. It's more realistic self-talk. I did my best with this time and the resources that I have. Fifth, celebrating my small wins, waiting for a big achievement. Instead of, again, waiting for this big achievement to feel proud, I want to practice acknowledging any small step. And I always say to everyone in all my resiliency talks, 1 is greater than 0. And so celebrating as small wins, embracing mistakes as learning opportunities, as we just talked about, setting boundaries, right? How can I also, what are the, yes, opportunities that I'm going to take on and the activities and the demands, but it's also learning to set boundaries. What the things, the demands that I think that, it can be very unrealistic. It will be too much and might lead to exhaustion. I need to also learn to say no. How can I be, again, assertive and protect myself? So maybe I have to decline. Maybe I need to learn to delegate. And of course, self-care, which is always important. And I always say quality support, a mentor, a coach, a therapist, a trusted friend. Always you want to seek support because it provides you with a sense of belonging, emotional support, and practical assistance.
Thanks, Katty. Wagner, I'd like to bring you in next because a lot of your work focuses on sleep. There's a direct link between mental illness and sleep, but many women just aren't getting enough sleep. What are the main reasons that women are sleep deprived?
Thank you. I don't need to tell a group of women here why many of us are not sleeping well. Like we heard earlier in the talk today, we have a lot going on. We have a lot on our plate. We are the caregivers of our families. We are working. We are looking after our elderly parents. Some of us are navigating changes related to perimenopause or menopause or postpartum. So there are so many things going on in our life on a day-to-day basis that we can often forget about sleep. Right? It's something that you can cut back on, or if you need to do, if you have deadlines, if you have things to do, it's the easiest thing to cut back on. But unfortunately, as you know, when we don't sleep well, we're less productive. We are less resilient emotionally and physically. So it's something that, unfortunately, women, it's just the way that our plates are full. But, the other thing, too, is there are a lot of things that we do to ourselves that I think we can do a better job. I talk to my patients a lot about focusing on sleep stealers. So things like screen time before bed. No one likes it when I bring that up, but it's a big one. Caffeine late into the day, how alcohol affects us as we age, especially, and its impact on our sleep. So there's a lot of external factors that impact our sleep, but there's a lot of things that we have control over that we can do to improve our sleep.
And what's optimal in terms of how much time sleep? Is it still 7 hours?
It's 7 to 9 hours, and you have to decide for yourself where you land in that spectrum. Some patients do really well on 7 hours. Some people actually need the full 9 hours to feel rested. So those were the recommendations. And in addition to sleeping that amount of time, the other thing that's really important to remember is the regularity of your sleep. So it's one thing to sleep a lot or get the right amount of sleep, but you want to have a regular bedtime and wake time as much as you can every day, even including the weekends.
So what do you do with women who do all of that but still have trouble sleeping? You must have a lot of people who suffer from
Yeah,
insomnia.
so if you're doing all of those things and you still find that you're struggling with sleep, I think it's important to reach out for help. There's a lot you can do in terms of your diet and making sure you have really optimal sleep hygiene. But if you're doing all of that and you're still struggling, reach out to your doctor. They're a great place to start. And then if you need someone like me, a sleep specialist, this is what I do all day, every day. It's really rewarding work when we have great progress with patients. So just know that you're not alone and you can reach out for help.
And what about situations where, in the case of a married couple, a spouse is giving you a hard time sleeping? You have different sleep strategies that I think affects a lot of women.
So this is my favorite topic to talk about because I think we can really move the needle here. I see patients every day who tell me, Dr. Filate, I'm doing everything you're telling me. I'm cutting out caffeine. I'm cutting out alcohol. I'm turning off the TV, which is so hard to do, but I'm doing all those things. And the minute I hit my pillow at night, I turn over to the person beside me and they're still watching TV. They may be snoring. They may be working on their laptop. So it's often very, very challenging if you're prioritizing your sleep to have someone who you're sharing the bed with who may have a different approach. So this is where I encourage all women and men too to have the conversation about maybe it's time to think about sleeping in different rooms. And I think we need to start by changing the terminology. When you look online and on social media, they use the term sleep divorce. Like, who wants to sign up for that? I don't. Right? So let's change the wording. Let's call it like a shared sleep plan, a sleep action plan, or somebody come up with something good. But we need to change the language around it. And instead of, I think the issue why people struggle with it because it's such a label and it's almost you think that your partner is going to think it's a reflection of how you feel about them. I don't love you or I don't care about you. And actually, I think it's the opposite. You care so much about your relationship because you need to be rested and you can be a better wife, a parent, a caregiver, a community member, a colleague when you're better rested. So I strongly encourage women to have that conversation. It doesn't have to be every night. It could be during the work week. And then you reconnect on the weekends or whatever works for you.
Oh, it's interesting. Okay, that's something to think about for sure. So Vivian, Dr. Vivian, speaking of sleep, perimenopause and menopause can affect sleep as well. What can women at this stage of life experience in terms of sleep?
So first of all, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Wagani. It's nice to meet you, Caddy. Perimenopause, by definition, is a time of instability. Hormone levels are going up, hormone levels are going down. You feel one way one day and one day differently. I think what women experience is a wide variety of symptoms. They may have excessive bleeding, they may have mood changes, they may have no period at all for a while, hot flashes, night sweats, and then all of a sudden they're back to normal cycles for 3 to 6 months. The instability is really what we're focused on. And the fact is, sometimes just talking to people and helping people understand that this is all normal is very reassuring. For other women, while it's normal, they may be incapacitated by those hormonal shifts. And then depending on the situation, we have lots of different choices as to what to do in terms of medication, hormones, birth control pills, whatever, depending on her symptoms. About 90% of us do have symptoms around this time, but only 20 to 30% of women will look for a pharmaceutical solution to those symptoms. Sometimes it's reassurance, focusing on healthy lifestyle, some of the things that can help you feel better. Wagani was just talking about some sleep and the sleep stealers. So it depends on the situation, depends on the individual.
Are there any tangibles that you can give in terms of the sleeping? I've heard of, for example, beds that are offer both cool and hot feelings, that for example?
So I don't know that there's any good research on that. I think what we really want to do is we really want to have women quantify what they're feeling. What's the frequency and what's the severity? And then depending on that, we can help people make good choices. Not every symptom is something that women consider disabling. They may recognize that they're having symptoms, but they're able to function very well and they're not disabled. On the other hand, we really need to recognize that sleep itself is so important. And in the past, when we've treated, for example, a woman with hormone therapy because of hot flashes or night sweats, we presumed that the sleep would get better. We don't make those presumptions anymore. If you're depressed or you're anxious or you're having significant menopausal symptoms and we treat that, it doesn't mean we've treated the sleep disorder. And so we really want to be clear about what we're expecting from treatment. And if necessary, we can treat the sleep issue separately than depression, anxiety, night sweats, and hot flashes. I think the ideal situation is what I would call personalized medicine. Talking to your healthcare provider about what's happening to you, about whether the symptoms are significant, severity and frequency, and whether or not you feel you need intervention. And then there's all kinds of different interventions. But we no longer presume that just by treating hot flashes, the sleep will improve. It may for some people, but it may not.
Do you think the medical community is getting it though? Like I've heard from many of my women readers about trying to go for help, but just, being told, oh, you'll be fine, just wait. How do women push back on that kind of messaging?
Attention, please. With the owner of a white Audi SUV, license plate
Sorry.
Maybe while Vivian is waiting for the, I guess, a code blue announcement, I can start the answer, and Vivian, you can finish. I think that's a very layered question, because for so long, many doctors were not properly taught about menopause care and symptoms related to menopause. I know when I went to medical school back in 2003, I had like one slide on what to do for the menopausal woman. And that's a whole generation of physicians who were not adequately taught about the changes related to perimenopause and menopause. I think it's changing. I think patients are now coming to us more informed than they have been before. And what was the past is no longer good enough. They come very well prepared to their appointments, and they come with lots of questions, but it does behoove the medical community, all of us, whether you're a family physician, a specialist, we should all have that knowledge to properly care for our patients.
Thank you, Wagane. Just to add on to that, unfortunately, I'm calling in from the hospital, and there was just this big announcement, which is why I couldn't respond to the question. The reality is that you want to be speaking to someone who is fluent in menopause, and I use the term fluent because not everybody is. And in Canada, there's a number of us that have been certified as menopause practitioners through the Menopause Society, which used to be called the North American Menopause Society. So if you're seeing your family physician, and for example, they're not good at sports medicine, they'll send you to another family physician who is. If they're not fluent and comfortable with menopause and some of the options, you can ask to see a menopause practitioner, someone who has more training, who's more expert in menopause. Dr. Vladi is one of those people. I'm one of those people. And when you go to the website of the Menopause Society, which is one of the most popular medical websites in the world, it will give you who is a menopause practitioner in your area of the country. You want to be talking to someone who's comfortable and not paternalistic, not telling you, oh, it'll go away, because some of the symptoms don't go away. And certainly there's a wide variety of options for treatment if necessary.
Okay, thank you. Katty, so adapting to change takes time and patience and often a lot of troubleshooting. You're a big proponent of self-compassion. What does that mean to you, and how can women apply it?
Thank you for this because I always say self-compassion and also self-efficacy, but especially self-compassion is one of the most underestimated feature factor when we talk about resiliency. So as I had mentioned before, self-compassion is a relationship with the self, but especially during difficult time. And it involves treating the self with kindness, understanding and acceptance, especially again in times that is difficult. And again, it's a concept that is rooted in mindfulness and emotional resilience. Now, there are three key features of self-compassion that, again, we always want to exercise. The first here, as we said, as I have mentioned, is self-kindness. So self-kindness versus self-judgment, right? So how can I treat myself with care, with warmth, with patience and understanding, reducing my tendency to judge myself? What's fascinating is that the more I also learn to practice empathy with myself and reducing my tendency to judge myself, I also become open towards others. I become less judgy towards others, even more showing more empathy towards others, right? So for instance, instead of thinking, I failed again, I'm so bad at this, I want to say to myself, it's okay to make mistakes. It happens to everyone. How can I focus? How can I reframe it as an opportunity here for growth and for learning? The second part, and actually before the second part, always I want everyone here to remember that growth comes from a realistic evaluation of myself. If my evaluation of myself is too negative, I'm removing myself from reality. Similarly, if my evaluation of myself is overglowing and infatuated sense of myself, I'm also removing myself from reality. The more I see myself grounded in reality, then the more I can then talk about improvement, making the steps moving forward. Second step, common humanity, as we call, versus isolation. So again, recognizing that challenges and suffering are part of human shared experiences rather than, again, feeling alone in our struggles, right? So for instance, when facing a setback, it could be at work or anything, I want to remind myself that, again, everyone faces obstacles at some point. This is part of being human, being part of being a human. I'm not alone in this. Let me seek quality support. Also looking back at my past successes, what is it that I have done that really helped me, that I can, again, work on today and tomorrow? What is it that happened before that did not work? Again, as not to dwell and ruminate, but as a constructive feedback. And the third one here, mindfulness versus over-identification. So identifying my thoughts, my emotions, and my reactions as a self-awareness so that I do not overly identify with them. I set up boundaries, say, hold on here, time out, so that then once I'm ready, then I can then put my thoughts and my emotions and everything into a perspective. Because otherwise, if I overly identify with my current negative thoughts and reactions and everything, I might risk of making decisions that might not be optimal, that I might regret. So again, if I feel overwhelmed, if you feel overwhelmed by stress or anything, take time. You want to take a pause, mental or physical timeout. I want to acknowledge it. So yes, I'm feeling anxious right now, but I'm not going to let here anxiety define me. And I want to practice here again. It could be deep breathing exercise and so on. Once I feel ready, let me go back to the situation and engage in, again, constructive coping.
Thank you. Wagini, you suggest a few standard tests for women to do regularly. What are those, and what should you add as you get older?
So thank you for that question. So to make it easy, I like to think about it in 5 buckets. So when we look at the data and we look at the main causes of death in women, they really fall into 5 categories. And then you can think about what tests you should be doing to address those 5 categories. So the number 1 disease in women that kills us, unfortunately, is cardiovascular disease. So the tests or the metrics you need to really have on your radar are your blood pressure, You need to have a good handle on your cholesterol levels, so those blood levels. And I would argue we need to be more aggressive than the standard guidelines, but that's a conversation for another time. And then to also have know your hemoglobin A1C or your risk for diabetes. So that would fall under the cardiovascular disease bucket. The second major cause of death in women is cancer. So you want to make sure you're doing all of your cancer screenings, your Pap test, your colonoscopy when the time comes, mammogram, and make sure you're on top of all of your cancer screening. The third would be dementia or diseases related to cognitive decline. So what can you do about that? We know that 46% of the risk of dementia are from preventable causes. So you want to get your hearing checked, your vision checked on a regular basis. The blood pressure piece comes back in, the cholesterol piece comes back in. Lifestyle factors are a big one in terms of, watching your alcohol intake, ensuring that you are, socially engaged and not isolated. And then the last bucket would be, for women especially, is diseases related to frailty. So as we age, we lose bone, we lose muscle. A woman is actually 20% more likely to die in the first year following a hip fracture. And that's a huge number. So we really want to make sure you're optimizing your bones. So you want to get a bone density test. And so that's how I like to think of it, in those buckets. And as you age, some buckets are more important than others. And then the last piece, and I'm sure Vivian would agree, is as you start to approach the menopause transition, you really want to make sure you have a good handle on each of those buckets, because your risk for those diseases definitely go up.
Dr. Vivian, is there anything you wanted to add to that? Like what's the timing of all of these tests? When should women start doing that?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. When's the timing of some of these tests? When should we start getting serious about the tests that Wagini mentioned?
Well, if you ask some of the experts, they'll say, for example, osteoporosis disease starts as a pediatric disease. It's how you eat when you're younger, whether you exercise. When we look at cardiovascular disease, the decisions you make in your 20s and 30s really have an impact. When we look at dementia, we know that whether or not you were physically fit and active in your 30s has an impact on your risk later on in life. So I think making healthy lifestyle choices happens at any age. And I would argue that you're never too late, but it's never too early to make some good lifestyle changes. One of the things that's really important as well is we're talking more and more about immunization. It's an area I'm particularly interested in. And one of the issues that I want to bring up to everyone is that HPV immunization against the human papillomavirus, which decreases your risk of cervical cancer, is a huge breakthrough. And we are under-immunized in Canada, and cervical cancer is on the rise. And just this week in Ontario, the guidelines have changed, and we now are no longer doing routine Pap tests. What we're doing is routine HPV screening. So we take a swab for HPV, and if you're negative, you're okay. And if you're positive, then we would do a Pap test to see if the virus has affected your cervix. So the guidelines are evolving. We're now doing mammograms at a younger age. We're doing mammograms at age 40. We're no longer waiting till age 50. So I think it's a very personalized discussion based on your own risk, your family history, and some of the issues that you may be dealing with if you're dealing with underlying disease and underlying risk. We always talk about personalized medicine, and by that we mean what is right for you may not be the same as what is right for your neighbor or your friend. And we know that genetically we do tests for breast cancer like BRCA testing, and this is really important. So you need to see your primary care practitioner, maybe your family doctor, it may be someone in the clinic, it may be a nurse practitioner, but your primary care assessment is really important because the guidelines are evolving in terms of age for different kinds of screening.
Now, I understand a big part of your work is brain health. Are there some strategies you can recommend for women to protect their brain health as they age?
Well, Wagini mentioned cardiovascular risk. And when we talk about brain, a stroke, for example, is a brain attack the way a heart attack affects the heart. So what's good for your brain is good, and what's good for your heart is good for your brain. You want there to be good blood flow to your brain. So what does that mean? It means normal blood pressure, and it means low cholesterol, because we don't want the brain to be full of fat. We want the brain to get good nutrition. We know that stress has an impact on brain health. And when there were studies done looking at the effect on telomeres, telomeres are the caps on the ends of the chromosomes. And in 2009, Dr. Elizabeth Blackburn got the Nobel Prize when she looked at telomeres in two groups of women. One group of women were healthy and had healthy children. The other group of women were healthy, but had children with chronic diseases. And that was her model for chronic unrelenting stress, was having a child with a chronic disease. Well, what she saw after the research was analyzed was that the women with children who were chronically stressed had telomeres that were about 10 years older than the women who had healthy children. So we know that chronic stress ages our chromosomes. It's not just how we feel, although that's important, it actually is aging our chromosomes. So we think that social connectedness, stress reduction, exercise, diet, blood pressure are all very important to protect brain health on an ongoing basis. And I wouldn't say that it's a one-stop shop. I think you want to make these choices on an ongoing basis. We saw with COVID, when people were isolated, they became depressed, they became anxious. That social interaction is so important. So you really want to have an overview and be making good lifestyle choices on an ongoing basis.
Okay, before I turn to the audience for questions, I have a question for all three of you, so if we can keep the answers brief. I'll start with you, Katty. It's very easy for plans to get derailed, especially when you're a spouse, mother, caregiver. There's a lot of balls in the air, and things fall apart. Maybe you plan to work out, but it doesn't work out. You plan to eat healthy, but something happens where you find yourself having to grab an unhealthy snack on the way. There's a family emergency. It's just easy sometimes, unfortunately, to just throw your hands up and give up. So what's your advice for people in that scenario? Keep your answers quick so we can get to the audience, please.
Absolutely, thank you. That's an important question, right? Because again, we all experience this. Sometimes even it can be weekly or even day to day. What I would say is, again, shift your mindset from this all or none thinking to something better than nothing. For instance, let's say your plan today was to go to the gym for 1 hour, and now I'm not able to do it anymore. Rather than thinking that, oh, I don't have time for my full workout, therefore I'm going to skip it altogether, maybe I can say, you know what, instead of this 1 hour, how about I walk outside for 10 minutes? The second part is, again, a lot of times, how can I give myself permission also to pause without guilt, right? And that's, again, a sign of, again, adaptability. So it's about reprioritizing, again, my decisions or the demands or whatever is coming up, and also normalizing it. And again, part of that is the flexibility and adjusting here our expectations. Part of it is also, again, as I had mentioned before, practicing here the SMART goals. It has to be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and also time-bound. But when we say about prioritizing goals, it involves decision making. I'm going to do A, B, C today. Something else comes up. Maybe I'm going to do C and D today. Tomorrow I can catch up with A. Maybe next Tuesday with B. And again, being recognizing our hard work and achievement, which is very, very important. Breaking down the task and again celebrating our wins.
Okay, thank you.
So what I would say is celebrate the small wins. There's so many things we have on our list to do on a daily basis, and if you're like me, I maybe get through 10% of my list. So I just focus on what did I do well and what was I accomplishing today, and just focus on that instead of the things that you didn't do.
Okay, and Dr. Vivian?
So what I think is that women need to learn how to say no, because when you say no to something, in effect, you're saying yes to something else. So if someone is asking you to do an extra project at work and it's a real compliment and you think, oh, I want to try maybe, but you know in your heart that you've got too much on your plate. If you just learn to say, no, thank you for thinking of me, but no, I can't do this, then really what in effect you're doing is you're saying yes to something else. You're saying yes to personal time, yes to time with your family, yes to something that you do want to accomplish. And I think as women, because we want to please and we're happy to have been offered something, we say things like, I'll try, I'll get back to you, let me think about it. Whereas if we just say, no, thank you for thinking of me, but the answer is no, then really what you've done is you've said yes. And when you give yourself some yeses, then you're able to move on and make some healthy choices. Now, there's no diet that people follow perfectly. There's no regimen that people follow perfectly. You know, the MIND diet, which is the diet for decreasing your risk of dementia, if you follow it 75 to 80% of the time, there's impact. You don't have to follow something 100% of the time, because none of us can and none of us do. But I think if we learn to say no to something, we're saying yes to something else.
Okay, sorry, I was optimistic that we could get questions, but we're actually out of time. So we'll have to leave it there. Kathy, Wagani, Vivian, thank you so much for taking the time today. So next, we're going to have a discussion about how to start tough conversations with your loved ones about matters such as care, financial, and life planning. Many women are part of the so-called sandwich generation, meaning they are caring for children and elderly parents at the same time, for example. We have two great speakers on deck to share their strategies. Let's introduce them. First, we have Amy Dupree, founder and president of LifeBridge Strategies. And Amy is an expert on lifestyle issues relating to retirement, aging, caregiving, and family dynamics. And joining us virtually is Amy Friesen, founder and CEO of Tea and Toast. Amy is a best-selling author, award-winning entrepreneur, and leading expert in elder care. Thank you both for joining us. Okay, so Amy Dupree, let's start with you. Can you please tell us briefly about the work you do?
A lot of my work is focused on helping people have the essential conversations that they need to have, especially in midlife and beyond, and really feeling confident and competent doing that. And I do that both for professionals, for financial advisors, and for the rest of us, and as a consultant to the Scotiabank Women Initiative.
Wonderful. Amy Friesen, same question?
Absolutely. I specialize in elder care, helping folks figure out what their plan is for today and for tomorrow, as well as navigating senior living options and really trying to put caregivers and their families' mind at ease and really help them through the whole process from start to finish.
Wonderful. Okay, so Amy Friesen, staying with you for a moment, what are some conversation topics that women find themselves needing to have with elderly or aging parents?
There's lots of conversation topics that come up, and they come up at all different times in people's lives and on their elder care journey. I usually work within about 10 of them, but I think kind of the top ones that come up really regularly are conversations on legal matters. Where is the paperwork? Is it done? Is it, do we need wills and powers of attorney? I also have a lot of conversations around finance. Where are the current assets? What does it look like? Is there funds that are saved? Are we going to help support our loved ones in retirement and beyond? And then I would say the third one that comes up a lot is expectations conversations. You know, caregiving can creep in really, really slowly with an errand here or helping with a doctor's appointment there. And it's really important to know what you can do as a caregiver and what your capacity is, and try to match that as best you can with what your loved one's expectations of you as a caregiver is.
Thanks. Amy Dupree, so why these conversations are extremely difficult to start? I heard another panelist mentioning just about the thought of even talking about money, it's like a brick wall. Would you agree?
I do agree with that, and I think some of the other conversations that Amy was mentioning too around caregiving. You know, if you think about those conversations and you're the older adult, a lot of them can feel very threatening to our independence, to our quality of life. And I think as those of us who are the caregivers, sometimes we just don't know how to start those conversations. It's very, you know, we come from a place of love and often concern, and sometimes that has us approach the conversations in ways that make the older adult feel even more threatened, when that's the opposite of what we want to do.
So what are the common reactions that the aging parents will have?
Well, you know, one of my favorite stories about this is I was doing a workshop once, and we were talking about people having driving issues as they age, and this gentleman said, what I did is I walked into my father's house, and I went over and I took his keys, and I said, "You're done driving." And I said, "Well, how did that go over?" And he said, "Not that well." And so what I said to him was, can you imagine if I walked in your house and I grabbed your keys and said that? And he said to me, "But I'm okay, I'm driving okay. That would be silly." And I said, "And that's what your father thinks too." So one of the things we have to think about as we approach those conversations is putting ourselves in the position of the person we're talking to. And I think one of the best openers we can use is to say, my goal is to help support your independence, your quality of life, and that's why I want to have this conversation. Because when we do that, it can help bring down people's defenses.
Can you think of other ways of approaching the conversation? Maybe mentioning friends that have gone through the same
Sure,
thing?
friends who've gone through is a great one. Again, I think it's all of the conversations. If it's about money, and we've talked a lot today about the money conversations, and that, you know, those, obviously, there's all the taboo around having the conversation. One of the great ways I like to approach the money conversations with people is to say, you know, let's talk about an estate plan. You know, you don't even know what your parents' estate plan is or what their finances are. You can talk about what you're doing in your own life in your estate plan, in doing it or reviewing it, or how you're looking at your financial plan again. And what it made you think about is that you really didn't know what your parents might want if they needed something. And so that's why I'd like to have this conversation, which you might guess goes over much better than, "I need to talk about your money." So it's really just shifting how we have the conversations. And I also like to say, there's no magic. Not what works for one family isn't going to work for every family. But if you have kind of a toolkit of 2 or 3 approaches, usually you can get through it and move into the conversation. And again, I would also say slowly, and thinking about it in terms of multiple conversations. Small conversations done well tend to be more productive than trying to do it all at one time. And it helps people be less overwhelmed.
Oh, that's great advice. Amy Friesen, you focus on encouraging women to prepare or do a self-assessment before broaching these conversations. Can you tell us what's included in that process?
Sure. I do have a lot of conversations with women who are stretched very thin, and I think that it's really important to do a self-inventory before you have any of these conversations. Some of the reasons would be just to outline what your actual capacity is. Are you able to be a full-time caregiver, a part-time caregiver, or involved in any way? I think it's really important to be honest with ourselves as women and as caregivers so that we don't continue to be overstretched. You know, one of the other things is, you know, do we have the financial resources to support our loved ones? Many people that are aging at this point don't have the financial resources and have to tap into their children, but that might not be something that you can do. And having that really honest conversation with yourself beforehand better prepares you to approach the conversation with your loved one so that you're not caught off guard. And worst of all, you're not ending up in a fight, you know, over whichever conversation and whichever matter you're talking about. And I would also say that the self-inventory really helps women specifically decide whether they actually want to be a caregiver. I would tell you and lots of others that, you know, it's not mandatory for any of us to be caregivers for our loved ones. And I think that because of family obligations and things like that, many of us just do it. But do we have the capacity again to do that and to really understand what you want as a part of your life before you take on the conversations with your loved ones.
Okay, this is a question for both Amy's. Is there a point when we should actually start these conversations with our parents? Because I think a lot of us are like, well, that's for other people to deal with. That's never going to happen to me. I'm not going to have to deal with this.
Right.
Amy Dupree, maybe we'll start with you.
Okay, great. So I always advocate for early and often. Those are my words that I say. You know, it's a conversation you really can start when, if your parents are healthy, this is a great time to have a conversation. And if you have siblings, to start having conversations. They can be short and casual, but you know, as I'm thinking about our family and aging and thinking about what my role might be, so honestly, it's never too early to have these conversations. I know we say that about everything, and you're thinking, I'm already overwhelmed. I can't have a conversation about everything. But this is one with your parents to just find out, what do they want as they're getting older? What feels like quality of life for them? Where do they want to live? And you know what you're going to find out? Almost nobody's already thought about this. So this could become actually kind of an open, interesting conversation if your family is healthy and doing well. And if you're already in the midst of caregiving, it's not too late. That's when most people have the conversations. And then it's a different kind of conversation, but now it may be, so, you know, this is where things are today. As we look forward, if it changes and this no longer works for us, what is it you might want? Okay, so it's again putting it back, trying to find out the quality of life somebody wants. And then if you don't know what the financial situation is, that's when you can then broach that and say, so one of the things we want to look at is that realistic? Could we make sure that happens for you? Okay? So tying quality of life to the money instead of just going straight to money can be an easier way to get there.
Amy, what's a trigger point in your mind?
I actually agree with Amy on this as well, is that earlier and often is a much better plan. Most people, to Amy's point, don't actually do any conversations until they're stuck with a decision or a crisis on their hands, and that makes things much more tense and more difficult. More things have to be at play. People are taking off time from work, and there's stressors and different things, as well as maybe people are moving or bringing in care. And so if you can start the conversations as early as possible, it gives you a little bit more of a leeway to pick away and just do them in little bite-sized pieces, because truthfully, there's a lot of conversations you can have in elder care. And so if you can just do a piece of one of them, to find out where the interest lies, to, you know, maybe find out what your loved one really would like to do in the future, maybe with finance or housing or whatnot, just depending on what the conversation is. Those bite-sized pieces make it a lot easier to keep the progress consistent, and then have a sort of planned gathering so that if something does happen, you probably will have to have other conversations or more of those conversations, but at the very least, you've started a base for it.
I just want to add something to this too, and I agree with everything you just said, Amy, too. The thing I want to add is something that I like to use called triggers and obstacles. And this is when you're having a conversation, this often works well when you're talking to someone and you're concerned about their living situation. And you know, one of the things that if I've been doing this for 40 years, and I was a caregiver to my parents for a decade. And if you ask someone about where they're living now, and you can see that this may not be a great solution for the future, often they'll say, I'll think about that later, sort of thing. So in that, and I had this conversation once with my uncle, and it was great. He was 93, living on his own, doing well, and he was actually still working. And his wife had passed. He was in a condo, but this was not going to be a good situation, probably long term. And so I said to him, so Uncle Al, I'm wondering, what do you think would tell you it was time to do something different? That's the trigger. And he surprised me because there was a whole other conversation we'd had, so I thought he was going to go to that. And he said, when I can't drive anymore because I'm going to get isolated here. So then he gave me another trigger, which I can't remember right now. And then it's the obstacle question. So what do you think might get in the way of making that move? And when you talk about obstacles, they are practical and emotional. And often the emotional one is if the spouse died while they were living in that home, leaving there feels like losing your spouse all over again. And so the emotional ones are usually around grief. And so often, you know, if I'm doing this, I can talk to people about, you're going to grieve at some point if you do this, but if you actually move through that, and we talk about how they've gotten through grief in the past and how they can do that now. But then there's the practical side. Downsizing is hard, moving is hard. So triggers and obstacles can help people move from the someday I'll think of that to actually having somewhat of a plan that you can come back to.
Great, that's a great answer. This question's for both Amy's. Difficult discussions are not just with aging parents, it can be with the spouses directly. I heard somebody in the audience mention if her spouse were to pass away, she may look at changing an advisor because she wasn't as involved with the finances. How can spouses approach these types of discussions with each other? Amy Friesen, let's start with you.
Sure. I think that, you know, regardless of who you're having the conversation with, it's going to be difficult. And I've had folks as well say the same thing. They would change advisors or they would change the way they're doing it once their spouse passes away. So I would suggest maybe setting a time in the calendar, especially as we age. But again, planning earlier than later is always helpful as well. And maybe setting a weekly appointment or a monthly appointment, depending on where you're at. It doesn't have to be super long. It doesn't have to be super dense, but check something off your list. You know, start with a list of things that maybe you guys need to consider and just start going through it just like a checklist of anything else so that you stay on topic. And that you actually are actively moving through these processes and the questions so that everybody comes at the other end of these questions with a plan that they can either, go to your computer and look at, or they can remember, that conversation. Oh yeah, by the way, we wanted to do this when this happened. So I think that just, again, picking away at the conversations earlier rather than later. Because in crisis, those conversations are more of decisions than actual conversations. So that'd be really important to kind of just get your checklist together of things that are important to you and to schedule that conversation.
So one of my favorite things is to say life and money go hand in hand. So one of the things you can do in starting these conversations is to start with the life side of it, which often is a little bit easier. And one of my favorite conversations to suggest to people is to talk about something that likely, as a couple, they've never talked about, which is what was money like for you growing up? What was money like in your family? And what did you take away from that? Because couples learn a lot from each other on that. And I encourage everybody in the room to think about that. It's really interesting because you start to see where you got some of your values around money and maybe some of your fears around money. So it opens up kind of a safer, easier way to get in sometimes to the conversation. And then the second part is I agree with everything Amy said about, it's not a one and done, do it small. But then the next thing you talk about are life goals. Again, life and money go hand in hand. So you kind of get a basis for knowing each other better, and then you go into life goals. What is it we're trying to accomplish? And then you can go to the financial planning conversation, right? And I think the beauty of that is that engages everybody. So whether both people are super interested in the money or only one person's really interested in talking about that, but typically both people are interested in talking about life goals and what they want to achieve, and as a couple and individually. So that can be an easier in.
What about setting up a death binder, and maybe define what that is? I don't know if everyone in the audience knows.
Doesn't that make you want to go home to do a death binder? but this is a really important thing for all of us. And, this isn't like you do this after a certain age, right? We all should have what are the most important things that people would need to know if something happened to us. And that includes where do they find your passwords? That's always the one that, now we have to think about. Or, where are things stored? But everything should be in one place and easy, and somebody should actually know where it is. That's important too. I've done many workshops where clients have come up and said to me, my uncle died and we found out that we were the executor, or, we didn't know where anything was, or, we knew so-and-so had a will, but nobody knows where the will is. But it's even beyond that, right? So think about some of the things we don't think about, which I think should go into the death binder. Who would you want notified? It used to be people had a little black book that had all their phone numbers in it and everything. Well, where is that now? It's in your phone. So can anybody access your phone? And have you set up legacy things on, I use Gmail, and I set up the legacy people that can be notified. If I'm not on my Gmail for 3 months, they get notified. So that keeps popping up, right? So it makes me a little nervous. It's like, could they wait 20 years and send me those notifications? But those sort of things that are really basic and practical, it's not just the financial, it's all of those kind of things that make it easier or harder for the people we love afterwards.
Yeah, I've written about death binders before, so I sort of liken them to, when you go to an Airbnb and there's this manual that explains everything about the house. It's like that. So it has any question you have, it's just only for your life. Any questions somebody would have about your life, where to find your most important papers. And I'm not just talking like wills and powers of attorney, but it could be anything, like how to shut off the emergency lights in your house, how sprinklers. It could be anything to do with your life. Anyway.
And you had you said that was one of the most frequently Googled or liked articles that you wrote, isn't that right?
Yeah, somebody called it Death Binder, and so I decided I liked it, and then a lot of people liked the term. I guess it just got their attention for whatever reason. Anyway, let's move on to family dynamics. So the chat with aging parents, but then you come from a large family. How do you navigate that? Because it can be very difficult. Maybe some people have a certain idea for what they want to see with mom and dad. Other people have another idea.
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things in this is we have often people have a mistaken belief, and I had this with my family, that because we all came from the same family, that we shared values about things and that we would see things the same way. It's probably one of the most common things I hear families say, I cannot believe my brother feels that way. We came from the same family. So if we can go into it not making that assumption, that would be helpful. And then being realistic. So there are some things we need to consider in task division and who's going to do what. And, we may have a family member who is really not very engaged in the family, and then people are surprised when they don't come in and help with caregiving. So there's being realistic, and then it's looking at who's the best at certain things. So I do these essential conversations with families, so I hear a lot of the I can't believe responses, and one of them is, I can't believe my sister did not ask the doctor that when she was there with my mother. And so then I usually say, is your sister a good advocate? No, she's terrible. So why did you send her to the doctor, right? So maybe you need to be on Zoom in that meeting. So being realistic about what each sibling is willing to do. And there are 2 times that I see families really blow up. One is during caregiving, and the other is when the estate is settled. And a lot of it is preventable. And so earlier conversations with family, if you can have that, about what do you think you'd be willing to do, and then some realism added in. And then don't hesitate, if your family can't handle these conversations alone, to have a professional help. It doesn't mean you're a failure. Lots of families struggle with this. But a professional can help you do it and help get, hopefully, the goal is more family harmony at the end of it.
Amy, did you have anything you wanted to add? Virtual Amy?
I again agree. And I would say that one of the other things that families could do in these types of conversations is, because there's a lot of families that are at a distance now, we don't congregate so closely anymore. I've had clients actually tell me that they set up a time a couple times a year and fly in the family members. They actually put it through the estate for expenses and things. I mean, obviously you could do it whichever way you want, but they put it through the estate so that a couple times a year, everybody's in the same room, getting the same download of information, getting caught up, and making sure they're all on the same page. And that really tends to help quite a bit, especially because there oftentimes what happens in the families that I see is that the caregivers that are at a distance often think that the situation at home is not as dire as the on the ground caregivers. You know, the caregivers will say, you know, these things are happening, we need to start making a move, we need to start doing this. And then the out of town caregiver will say, no, mom and dad are fine, I just saw them. And it really derails everything. So if we can kind of get around that point that doesn't happen, and keep on track, and these types of family conversations really help to do that.
Okay, we're going to have to leave things here. Amy, and Amy, thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, now we're going to take a break. Oh, no, we're not. No, I'm sorry. Sorry. I'm sorry about that. Okay, to conclude our program, I would like to introduce our closing keynote. It's Sejal Patel, founder and CEO of Sejal L and Sejal Wealth Consulting. Sejal is a financial education and consulting platform that helps women build financial independence. It also helps financial institutions better serve women investors and corporations to create effective and inclusive financial wellness programs. Sejal is a CFA with more than 25 years in the financial industry across North America and Asia. She has worked as a high net worth strategist, investment analyst, and business anchor for BNN and CNBC Asia, delivering market insights to millions. Welcome, Sejal.
Thank you for the introduction, Deanne, and for inviting me to be a part of Wealth Management for Women. It's a pleasure to be here and be part of such an important conversation. Good afternoon, everyone, and hello to all of those joining us online. So, I have a little confession to make. I'm obsessed with money. I think about it all the time, but not the way that you probably think I do. You see, ever since I was a young adult working in the financial industry, I've always wondered why this piece of paper, or I guess it's polymer now, but polymer, how it can bring out so many emotions in people. Relief, calm, fear, even greed. I've often wondered how this thing can control people to do the things that they do and not do what they should do. And I know I'm not the only one. In fact, I know that all of us, and that means you and you and you and all of those online, we all think about money because we know instinctively that we need it to survive and thrive. It's said that we make 35,000 conscious and unconscious decisions every day, and a few hundred of those are financial ones. So we make micro decisions, right? Should I buy coffee or should I buy a latte? Should I tip and how much? Should I fill up gas in the morning or in the evening when it's a few cents a liter cheaper? Should I buy American or Canadian? We make these monthly decisions, right? Should I pay off my credit card in full or in part? Should I treat myself to a massage or maybe save it for a rainy day? And then we make the big decisions, the macro decisions. Should I go for that promotion or should I just stay where I am? Should I quit my job? Should I invest or pay down my mortgage? Right? We all do this. You know what else we do? We not only think about how we spend our money, we think about how others should spend their money. Right? Let's be honest. Maybe we see someone with a designer handbag or driving a luxury car and we think, what a waste of money. Or show off. Or, God, what do they do? I wish I had that. We see parents buying their kids toys and gadgets and we think, boy, those kids are going to be spoiled brats. We hate on multimillionaires and billionaires and we feel sorry for the poor. And we make these judgments without truly knowing how much wealth they have. But even more important, we have no idea what experiences or challenges they face, or even the luck that's come into them that has shaped their lens of money. And what we're really doing is we're projecting our values and our beliefs. I'll tell you what's really crazy. We're not even aware of where our own beliefs came from. What if I were to tell you that by the time we're 7 years old, many of our money habits are set? 7. That means before we even understand what a credit score is or what a stock is, we've already absorbed deep-rooted beliefs about money that are going to shape our financial decisions for the rest of our lives. Dr. David Whitebread and Dr. Suppingham from the University of Cambridge, they did this study, and they found that by the time someone's age 7, kids develop behaviors around spending, saving, and even financial risk-taking just from watching people around them. And it's primarily their parents. This is what psychologists call money scripts. Unconscious beliefs we pick up in childhood and carry it on to our adulthood. And 9 times out of 10, we're not even aware of it. Now, are all money scripts bad? Of course not. In my online financial education program, it's called Strictly Money for Women, I have an entire lesson based on mindset and money scripts. It's the second lesson of the 14 lesson because I believe that this is the foundation for women to build wealth the right way. And I've told these 1,200 women who have gone through it that these money scripts that they believe actually do serve as strengths. On some level it works, because if it didn't, they wouldn't have gotten as far as they did. But in other ways, it's holding them back. For example, people with a money avoidance script. These are people who don't like to think about it or talk about it. So they might avoid reading financial credit card statements. They typically have a hard time meeting financial deadlines like paying bills or filing taxes on time. They can feel overwhelmed and sometimes even feel incompetent when it comes to money. Then there's someone with a money worship script. These are people who love to chase wealth. They think that the more money and things that they have, the happier they'll be. And it'll solve all their problems. So they never feel like it's enough, and they often work and put work before spending time with their family and friends. Another one is the money vigilance script. Now, these are people who have this personality where they're always evaluating their financial habits to make sure that they're hitting their goals. They budget, they try to stick to it, they often avoid debt altogether. Now, you might think that that sounds healthy, but the problem arises when their vigilance gets in the way of their happiness and health because they're too strict. And these are people, folks, that are often labeled as frugal or cheap. Does any of this resonate? A little bit? Yes? These beliefs aren't just mental baggage, right? They have real impact on financial outcomes, from how we save and how we invest and whether we even feel secure. Now, the good news is is that parents are talking about money more with their kids. The not so good news is that parents tend to talk to their boys more than girls about money. And there are gender differences on what they talk about. So a few years ago, North Carolina State University did a study on this, and they found that parents would typically talk to their daughters about their spending habits and budgeting. You want to take a guess at what they talk to the boys about? Yeah, they were far more statistically likely to talk to their sons about investing and how to use credit. Now, I don't believe that this is done on purpose. I think that this has been happening because of societal and cultural norms that are so subconsciously ingrained in adults that they're not even aware of it. But the consequences are real. How many women here think that they are good at managing the household budget? Raise your hand. Yeah. Now, how many women think they are equally as good in investing? Okay. If you don't think you are, you're probably in the majority, I would say. Typically, most women tell me when they're looking at investing or building wealth that it makes them nervous, that they don't feel as confident when they're, as they would, making purchases. And this isn't a knock on at all. I think managing your purse strings is a very important skill. The problem, though, is that you can't budget your way to wealth. You can't do it. Our expenses are rising much faster than our wages, and at some point, those wages stop. So the only way to do it is if you're investing to make sure you don't outlive your savings. And this is why, when I talk about this, I really stress that we have to put more weight or more focus on the revenue side of the equation, even more than the expense side of the equation. So if you do struggle with managing money that you can't quite explain, if any of what I said about money scripts or the messages that you've received or you believed even resonate, know this: you're not alone. All of us have our financial challenges, and we all make self-limiting financial decisions. I've been in the financial industry for 25 years, and I still catch myself making regretful decisions. I find myself procrastinating because I am a bit of a perfectionist and I feel like I need to know everything before I do it. So you're not alone. It's also not your fault, but it is your problem. And it's a problem that you can solve starting today. Now that you recognize that all this noise and these unfounded stories you've been telling yourself are just that, they're stories, they're not the truth, you have the power to rewrite it. You have the power to make different choices, and you have the power to create different habits. So how do you start? Well, I want to share 3 powerful shifts in the way that you can change how you approach money. Awareness, systems, and competence. So let's break it down. Awareness. You can't change what you don't see. And now you know that you have money beliefs. Some good, some of it not so good. Some conscious, most of it unconscious. So here's what I want you to do today or sometime this week. Ask yourself, where did these beliefs come from? Do you think that building wealth is hard? That rich people are greedy? That talking about money is crude? That men are better at money? Why do you think you believe that? Because I promise you, you didn't make that up out of thin air. It is something that you have heard or seen or read. And it's more likely due to an event where you felt shame or less than, or you were made to feel scared. When you do this exercise, when you become curious about your money scripts, please do me this one favor. They've talked about this earlier, and I concur. Check the self-judgment at the door. Cloak yourself in self-compassion, because if you don't, you're going to just bury your head and nothing will change. And if you ever follow Maya Angelou, she has this very famous saying, when you know better, you do better. Well, you know better now. 2, systems. Set up systems. Why? Because we are human and we are far more emotional than we are logical. And that means we make financial decisions a lot more often emotionally than we do logically. You know, there's a reason why there's trillions and trillions of dollars of marketing budgets spent, and they're not trying to appeal to our logic, right? The mistake that we make, though, is that we rely on willpower to control these emotions, and we can't, not consistently, because willpower is actually finite. We only have so much, and all it takes is one bad day, one exhausting day, and then we blow it. And this is why you need systems. Tiny guardrails that automate the good financial decisions. Things like paying yourself first, right? Set up that automatic transfer to your savings before you touch your paycheck. Automate your investments. Dollar cost averaging is easy, and it is a brilliant investment strategy. Have an accountability partner. If you have a financial advisor, they're great accountability partners. I promise you that I teach these systems, and I have witnessed firsthand how easy it is to make strides when you just get out of your own way. 3, the third most powerful step that you can make is gain competence. And I'm going to say this is probably the most important, because the biggest barrier to financial success that I have seen is due to a bias called the complexity aversion. Ever heard of that term? Complexity aversion? So this is when you put off important financial decisions or tasks because you've become so overwhelmed and you're afraid to make a stupid mistake. We mistake that, though. We mistake that bias, complexity aversion, for having a lack of confidence, right? How many times have you heard that women lack confidence? Maybe you think you lack confidence. You don't lack confidence. You lack competence. If you haven't learned the concepts and the skills to manage money and financial risk, if you haven't just learned simple things like the investing or saving principles, which I promise you is very easy to learn, then of course you're going to feel overwhelmed and afraid to make a mistake, because you're operating in the unknown and it is stopping you in your tracks. So I need you to stop believing that you have a confidence problem. And I also need you to stop believing that you can talk your way into being more confident, or take some mindset or visionary voodoo thing and poof, you wake up and whoo, I'm confident and I'm going to be rich. Okay, it doesn't work that way. I know, because I've seen a lot of people be overconfident and not competent, and trust me, it doesn't end well. But when you do build your knowledge, and when you roll up your sleeves and you apply that knowledge, you will feel confident, I promise you. This is why financial education matters so much, and it's the most important gift that you can give yourself. So to recap, understand why you do what you do with money without judgment. Build small systems that make good financial choices easy, and commit to learning. Because the more you know, the more confident you will be and the less overwhelmed you'll be. You know, I started my financial education and consultancy platform, Sagel, 7 years ago. Because after 20 years in the financial world and being a TV business journalist, I knew with every fiber of my being that we will face a prosperity crisis and will also face a financial power struggle crisis. We may already be there. Look, there's a lot of things that are happening that's not in our immediate control, but we can control how we think and what we do. We can start to erase those outdated money values and beliefs that no longer serve us. Money shouldn't be a dirty word. It shouldn't bring fear or pain or insecurity. And contrary to what a lot of people say, money isn't evil. Like I said at the start, it's this piece of polymer, right? It has no power. It is our values and our beliefs and how we manifest through that money that gives it power. So I say to all of you, attach healthy beliefs, attach altruistic values, use it for good. Use it to advocate for your prosperity and our collective prosperity. Because right now, your educated voice and wealth is needed more than ever. Thank you.
Thank you, Sagel, for that excellent closing presentation. It was truly authentic and inspiring. I really enjoyed it. I would like to thank lots of actionable items there. You're not alone. It's not your fault. You have the power to solve the problem. You have the power to move your finances forward, move the needle. Anyway, I would like to thank the other speakers today as well, and everyone in the live and virtual audiences. And on behalf of the Globe and Mail, I would like to thank TD for making this event possible. Please be on the lookout for the post-event survey in your inboxes. We truly value your feedback on these events to keep improving the experience. And now, take two, I would like to invite those in the live audience to stay and enjoy some networking and refreshments. Thanks again, everyone. Have a good day.